Hey, my name is Raul. You are watching the Ukraine on Fire project. Let's start with a comment from a Russian subscriber named Oleg. He was offended that I consider him and the entire Russian people indiscriminately fascist orcs for complicity with Putin. Do not judge and you will not be judged, Oleg adds thoughtfully. Oleg, after the invasion of Ukraine and especially after Bucha, the discourse about good Russians came to an end. And the tribunal in The Hague will judge, or maybe in Nuremberg, I hope so. But I understood your hint, they say, go try to oppose Putin. Oleg, it was your indifference that fed the monster from the moth. Yes, it's not just scary anymore. Now you can get 15 years for protesting. But that is precisely why we in Ukraine took to the Maidan in 2004 and 2014. That is why ordinary Ukrainians in Kherson are not afraid of tanks and armored personnel carriers. As you understand, Oleg, this man is not threatened by a paddy wagon or 15 years in prison. I don't know if he is still alive. Hope so. And luckily for you, not everyone in Russia are pussy too. Here is your compatriot from Kostroma. I don't know his name, but he's not an orc or a fascist. He is a human. First of all, human being, and then Russian. I see it that way. Thank you, man. There will be no Putin, there will be no Russia. If you stay, there is hope to build another Russia. But to be honest, I don't believe in any other Russia. With your propaganda of xenophobia, chauvinism, a special messianic path and destiny of the Russian people, you poisoned even children.
Hey Ratty, you know what? At Lisa's school, they collected humanitarian aid. Lisa brought socks for me and wrote me this letter. Babreva Elizaveta writes to Babayev Valery. I beg you, quickly kill Ukrainians and come home. Kill all Ukrainians and come home.
Бабаев Валерий. Пишет тебе Бабаева Елизавета. Прошу тебя, побыстрее убивай всех украинцев и приезжай домой.
Поскорее что это?
Убивай всех украинцев и приезжай домой.
Mom says she was stunned by what the child wrote. Well, yes.
Is the school collecting humanitarian aid to Ukraine? For the military or these people?
Humanitarian aid is being collected everywhere now. Not for the people, for the military.
All right then. Fuck those people. Now, perhaps, is the time to discuss another story. Russian TV channels have been broadcasting about it for a month now. Allegedly, we are not only the wrong country that does not have the right to exist. We also fight and defend ourselves incorrectly. According to the Russians, our troops were supposed to go out into the open field in the Donbass and near Kiev. Line up in a Spartan phalanx of hoplites or a Teutonic pig and wait for rockets, aircraft, then artillery and multiple rocket launchers to cover them. After that, the Chechens would cut off everyone's heads, and the Russian Spetsnaz stole berets and mobile phones. Good plan for the money, would say Shoigu, the Russian Minister of Defense. Especially since the money was stolen in advance. But the Ukrainian army decided that such a victory would be insultingly easy for the world's second army and decided to wage war with a large number of small groups. And the cities, with the help of garrisons and territorial defense, turned into fortresses. As a result, we let down the Russian generals and Putin himself. But don't think they are stupid. It just so happened that the Russians live at the same time as the rest of the world, but in different historical eras. The Russians, with the Mir space station, the internet, and the ability to visit the US, Japan, and Singapore, chose feudalism. Simple and clear social structure. Of course, this is a special Russian feudalism, where the main value is not land, but gas and oil, which are obtained from it. Everything else is pretty standard. Tsar Putin I, Lords Deripaska and Usmanov,
then the vassals of the feudal lords. The guardsmen of Putin the first stand separately. Army and navy. And now we need attention. Why can't the Russian army understand and accept the strategy of the Ukrainian headquarters? This is because during the feudal wars, the peasants did not participate in the wars. They didn't care to whom to pay taxes and who would kill and rape them. Because no matter how the war ends, someone is sure to be killed and raped. By and large, two organized criminal groups gathered in an open field, which could not divide the disputed territories, and no one asked the peasants. On this stands and will stand the great chipmunk people. Now imagine that one day not only the army of the ruler mobilized against the enemy army, but suddenly all the peasants of the country. Because they turned out to be free people of a democratic state. Young, imperfect, but held. Of course, from the point of view of the feudal lords and Putin I, this is a violation of the foundations.
Do I need this single-breasted suit? Don't you know that no one is fighting in a single-breasted one now? Ugliness. War is on the doorstep, and we are not ready.
But the choice of the social order is the voluntary choice of Putin and his subjects, who are fascinated by the television. So Russia does not need to be offended by Ukraine. Be thankful that for the past 8 years, maybe even all 30, we have taken the threat of a full-scale invasion quite lightly. On the 23rd of February this news would have made me uncork a bottle of Japanese whiskey and give thanks to the pagan gods. Zhirinovsky is no longer with us.
Vladimir Wolfovich, is it really you? I am very happy. Vladimir Wolfovich Zhirinovsky.
But now I sincerely regret the death of Vladimir Wolfovich. I wanted him to witness the collapse of all the imperial hopes of Russia, to know the bitterness of defeat and die from the curses of their compatriots, in shame, in hatred and contempt. But Zhirinovsky was always a cunning politician, and he left, albeit in torment, but conditionally at the peak of the conditional greatness of the empire and absolutely not smeared in this shameful war. Putin will have to meet his sunset with his stupid subordinates, propagandists, and the patriotic musical group Lube. Well, SOSO company. By the way, I have long wanted to introduce you to the work of Georgy Klyaknik. He painted an excellent picture for Lyube. And now we have a slightly new section called In the Footsteps of the Bremen Town Musicians. The fact is that at first Russia always denies any miscalculation, mistake or, God forbid, defeat. The empire is not mistaken, the emperor does not poop, Kabiva is the most beautiful woman in the world. Then it turns out that the empire is mistaken, the emperor has lost his shit, and Kabiva has been sent into exile in Switzerland, because she is no longer the most beautiful. Exactly the same story happened to soldiers who were digging trenches near the Chernobyl station. At first, Russia claimed that this was not true. Then General Shamanov said that there could be no radiation contamination, because during the Second World War trenches were already dug there and no one died from radiation. I am not kidding. And just the other day, videos and photos appeared on the network that confirm trenches were being dug, radiation dust was rising into the air. Russian soldiers did bring home a piece of light from Ukraine. I emphasize that Shamanov is one of the most reasonable generals in Russia. However, he does not remember the worst technological disaster of the 20th century. Imagine now the intellectual potential of the rest. In my previous stories, I promised the Russians that by April 7th they would begin to realize the real losses of the Russian Federation in Ukraine. Now you see information from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Army, and now you see a video from Russia, the city of Mikhailovsk. Along the road, an alley of the graves of Russian paratroopers. It is not as long as I would like. But in the Russian army it is customary to save the bodies of officers, and soldiers can be neglected. Do you know why the graves are right next to the road? So it is more convenient to lay rows that will go far into the field in the next month. This video partly confirms the BBC analysis. The publication uses only confirmed data from Russia. That is, real losses must be multiplied by 10.
Let's count. According to statistics, 20% of the casualties in the war are officers. 9 colonels, 1 captain of the first rank, 31 majors, 155 junior officers. Of the 7 dead Russian generals, Russia so far recognizes 1. At the same time, there is no missing column in the Russian casualty statistics at all. Apparently, the accounting department does not like this. But the most interesting is further. 15% of all the dead are Russian paratroopers. And that's a lot. It is clear that they were on the most important directions. It was they who were grounding Gostomel and Borodyanka, but in many other cases, the task could be performed by ordinary infantry. That did not happen. According to experts, ordinary Russian soldiers are probably not capable of effectively performing real combat missions. The losses of the guardsmen of the Emir of Chechnya Kadyrov were generally not considered by anyone. Although it is clear that the bulk disappeared in Bucha and near Mariupol. The rest can be attributed to non-combat losses associated with the inability to upload videos to TikTok. Yes, we must understand that Russia is a very large country. Russia can muster an army of 1 million reservists. And it's scary. On the other hand, it will be a zombie army, without normal uniforms, weapons, vehicles, and commanders. Not so scary anymore, is it? See how fearless Ukrainians can be. Here, one Ukrainian tank imposes a fight on an entire armored column of Russian troops. Most likely, in the coming days we will see the culmination of the war, which will take place in the east of our country. And here, either Russia will capture Donbass and Mariupol, which I do not want to believe and do not believe, or they will have to really sit down at the negotiating table and achieve results through diplomacy. Can the war drag on for years? Unlikely. Given the sanctions, every month we will become stronger, and Russia will weaken. But our lives will never be the same again. We are the frontier of Europe, and as long as the evil empire exists, we must be ready for a new invasion every day. Ukraine will fall without allies, Europe will fall without Ukraine. Do you think I'm exaggerating? Quite recently, having seen enough of the events in Ukraine, Finland was getting ready to join NATO. NATO said they would accept Finland instantly. Do you know what the Russians said? The Kremlin warned Helsinki that joining the alliance would entail, quote, serious consequences. A hybrid threat expert says there are already signs of Russian attempts to stir up conflict. We have seen, for example, that the Russian embassies in Sweden and Finland are now using Twitter to ask all Russian citizens to report any violations against them. How familiar? Oppression of the Russian-speaking population who do not want to live in Russia. There are no more halftones and understatements. There is a civilization and there is a horde that recognizes only force. The main problem is that the feudal lords have nuclear weapons and we cannot drive the rat into a corner. It should always see the exit at the end of the hole. And here we are again talking about negotiations and playing long. However, here is my forecast for the 9th of May. Putin will try to end the war because the Russian Empire is based on bonds, all dollars. The bonds crack loudly, the dollars run out very quickly. Even during the war they are stolen. And for the Russian soldiers, I have very bad news. The United States believes it will be able to identify the Russian units that committed the atrocities in Bucha. The Ukrainian special services already have some data. And if the US is talking about it, then they already know who it was. You watched the Project Ukraine on fire, the Russian Federation will lose. Glory to Ukraine. I will now show you where the attack on Belarus was being prepared from. And if a preemptive blow had not been dealt in 6 hours.